Welcome back to Viata International Academy. It is Teacher Carl here again, and in today's class we're going to be talking about things to do and places to visit in the city. Now, depending on whether you're taking a city break or a holiday to a city, or whether you are living in a city, usually the topics of discussion are going to be slightly different. So I've broken it into two sections so we can understand how we would talk about a city if we were on a city break or on a holiday, or the kind of things we would talk about if we were living in a city. So let's get into it. So firstly, you've chosen to go on a city break or a city holiday. This is usually because you are the type of person that loves to be in the city. Now, what do you like about the city? Is it the museums? Do you love to visit the museums, look at the pieces of art, or any of the exhibitions that are on display? I particularly like the Natural History Museum in London. Maybe you're a fan of architecture. You enjoy nothing more than walking around a city, taking in all of its architectural delights and wondering in amazement at the achievements that have been made. If you're like me, you are going to want to know where are the best nightclubs. I love nothing more than dancing the night away in an excellent nightclub in a city. Or maybe you visited the city because you're a bit of a foodie, in which case you're going to want to know where are the best restaurants. If you're a bit of a cultural buff and you like to learn about the cultural traditions about a particular country or a city, then you're going to be looking for cultural experiences, anything that can expand your knowledge of the city that you're visiting. So generally what I'm saying is that you are looking for the attractions of the city, the attractions that specifically tourists come to visit. Now, if you're on a city break, it's very unlikely that you're going to know your way around. So you're going to have to ask some of the locals, how do you get to some of these locations? So for example, maybe there's a particular church. You would like to go and have a look at the architecture, but you don't exactly know where it is. So you're going to need some directions. Where is it? How do I get there? So a couple of questions you might ask is, how do I get to the Roman Colosseum? Or where is the Fabric nightclub? These are questions that you may have to ask in order to get some directions. So you're going to need to be hot on your direction vocabulary. So remember, maybe you're going to be told to go straight, maybe turn left or turn right. Maybe you might require to go up some stairs or maybe even down some stairs. There are lots of other directions, so check back on some previous information to make sure you know exactly directions you're gonna need to take. And once you've experienced some of the city, you can then probably give some opinions and make some comparatives. So for example, I might say that in my opinion, Buckingham Palace was absolutely epic. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. The architecture was beautiful and it was awe-inspiring. Or maybe if you want to make a comparative between some two cities, you might say something like, oh, I like London much better than Mexico City. Maybe the nightclubs are better, or the restaurants and the food are better, or maybe the architecture is something that you prefer. So those are the ways that you might want to talk about a city if you're on a holiday or you're on a city break. Now, moving across to living in a city, this is a whole different experience and it's going to require conversation about different topics. Now, things like accommodation. What is the accommodation like in the city? Is it expensive? Is it cheap? Is it of a high standard or a very low standard? Accommodation are one of the first things people look at when they're considering moving to or living in a city. What kind of opportunities does a city present? Usually this is to do with work and employment opportunities. Schools is another very important factor to consider if you're living in a city. People with children will usually have lots of conversations before they decide which school they're going to send their children to. Transport. Talking about the transport is also very important. Usually in a city it's very congested, there are lots of traffic. So a lot of people choose to use the public transportation system in order to get to work and in order to get around. So do they have good bus links? Do they have an underground system? What about the cycle network? These are all things that you could consider and talk about when you're thinking about living or you have just moved to a city. The cost of living will determine whether you can live in the city or not. Clearly, if you make enough money in order to pay for your basics like your rent and your food, then you're going to be fine. However, some cities, particularly London and Hong Kong, the cost of living is astronomical and you have to be earning a lot of money to have a comfortable lifestyle. Next, you can talk to people about general experience about living in the city. How clean is the city? I know most of the cities I have visited are not particularly clean. However, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia is exceptionally clean. And finally, is it a good place for kids to grow up? I know in my personal opinion, I would want my kids growing up in the country. However, cities do offer good opportunities and facilities for kids to have an excellent upbringing. Now, when thinking about a city that you're going to move to or that you already live in, it's probably a good idea to weigh up and have an argument and list the pros and the cons. So the pros are the good things about the city, the cons are the bad things. So for example, if we were comparing a city, we might say that it has excellent schools and job opportunities. However, it has poor transport links and very high living costs. Next, there are some idioms that we could use when talking about the city. Clean as a whistle. That means a city is absolutely immaculate and there is no rubbish or litter anywhere. I would consider Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia clean as a whistle. Some cities you might describe as a hive of activity. That means there are lots and lots of people moving around and doing different things. Some parts of the city or particular nightclubs or restaurants you may describe as dead as a dodo. This means that they are not very busy and they are not very popular. And finally, if a city is very worn down and derelict, you may say that it has been through the wars. And finally, some adjectives that we can use to describe cities. So we may use ancient or historical, a city like Cairo, for example. Maybe we could describe it as lively or vibrant, cities like Barcelona, Miami, and Los Angeles. An attractive city, maybe the city of Agra. A bustling place, again, lots and lots of people moving around. New York and London are particularly bustling. And finally, picturesque or charming. I've heard people describe the city of Istanbul in Turkey as incredibly charming. So that concludes our look about talking about cities and the places in the cities. If you have any comments, leave them in the section below. I look forward to reading them and I'll see you in the next class.